I have the great privilege and honor to be with Maya today. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Sai. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you making the time and would love for you to kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we can dive in.
Absolutely. Well, it's as all of us, we're always refining, I think, who we are in the world, aren't we? And learning about ourselves. And I am in the constant process of like, how do I define what I do? And in fact, it's actually, I think one sentence would sum it up for me, and that is that I am committed to helping people thrive even under challenging circumstances, right? So I do that through a few mediums of working on emotional resilience, on mental fitness, on mindset, mental agility, and mindful self-leadership. So these are the areas that I'm really passionate. And as we chatted earlier before, when you asked me how was your day today, and I said it's a wonderful day because one of my clients had a breakthrough today. And so, there's a tremendous potential here for us as human beings to move towards the challenges that we are facing rather than, shy away from them. Yeah.
Very, very eloquently said. And Maya, of course, you know the narrative and the themes that we've been talking about. And I love what you just started to express, and I would love for you to elaborate. How do we really help people embrace the challenges and work through the challenges, Maya?
Well, look, as you probably know a little bit about my work, I believe that self-awareness sits at the heart of everything. So self-awareness and self-leadership, if we can't get ourselves above the line, it's going to be very, very difficult to get anyone else there. So I really believe that it starts there. And then, self-awareness and working on our personal resilience, there are some pretty foundational building blocks. But again, without self-awareness, it's kind of, we have one foot on the brake, one foot on the gas. Then when we have a degree of insight and vision, then we can take people on the journey with us, right? And then it's about, how do we develop empathy? How do I work on our unconscious bias? How do we manage our own? Because I think this is the challenge of this time, right? Is uncertainty brings up fear just by the very nature of what is happening. So when we are contracted in a place of fear, it's very difficult to, because we're not, we're also energetic beings. It's what we emanate that people react to more than words. We know that words are only a small proportion of how we communicate with each other. So I really am passionate about getting all people, but leaders in particular, in a place where they can really influence from their state, as well as their conviction, as well as the strategy that they have, and so on. And I think this is something that's still a bit of a blind spot that really needs addressing.
Definitely. And Maya, especially under, I'll say under these stressful conditions of now with COVID and what have you, and if you will, the unknowns that we're dealing with and the uncertainty, how do you really guide leaders to have that breakthrough and to truly, manifest their best self, if you will?
Look, and these are profound questions, right, that we're facing. And this is where I sometimes really draw on my spiritual roots and Buddhist practice, because in Buddhism, there's this idea of groundlessness,
Hmm.
and that ultimately, there's a good old Buddhist joke that says, nothing, relax, nothing is in control.
Yeah.
And that's always, in a sense, been true, but it's exacerbated now because we can actually see it. We can see it in front of us. And so I think it starts with acceptance
Hmm.
of the way things are. It's also resisting these sort of physiological, almost biological impulses to kind of be triggered into the state of fight and flight. So having some fundamental practices around self-regulating, and this stuff is not complicated. This is what I love about it, when we can introduce some of these strategies in a skillful way. And thankfully, we have now neuroscience behind us, in terms of being able to shift this nervous system, and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So it starts with recognizing, accepting, and then, that intelligent inquiry that's mashed up in kindness,
Hmm.
towards ourselves and others. So it's really an opportunity to grow in tremendous ways because we're compelled to. We, in fact, don't have a choice. We're either going to grow or we're going to drown, really. So, starts with self-awareness, with when we talk about resilience, I do believe that we can cultivate that to quite a large extent. Like I said, it's having some, unconditional foundations of our well-being that we are committed to. And again, I think in our Western world, a lot of it comes down to giving ourselves permission to find that bit of space and time to lead, because there's so much going on. We can get really drowned in that busyness of doing, to the point where, sometimes the doing becomes a bit empty.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can we imbue it with essence is actually by connecting with our own agency, and clarity and vision. So it's a big topic. Like if I look at one of my models, like if I look at my model for mindful leadership, it has 4 areas. So the first area is around focus and clarity, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second area is around personal resilience and well-being. The third area is around that mental fitness, agile mindset, being in that place of inquiry, of curiosity, of challenging ourselves, challenging our perceptions, challenging our limiting beliefs, challenging our stressful thoughts. Is it true? Is such a simple, powerful question that we fail to ask so often. Is
Yep.
it useful? And then finally, it's around, emotional intelligence and really growing in self-awareness and our ability to be empathic and kind and compassionate whilst holding on to, healthy boundaries and holding on to what needs to happen.
Very, very, very eloquently said. And you mentioned one key word that I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on, and that is permission. Are you sensing that leaders now, because of the conditions in which we find ourselves, are at this point, it's no longer asking for permission, but we have to almost take permission because of the situations in which we find ourselves, Maya?
Yes, absolutely. And this is, I think some of the best and most amazing people are also the ones that are hardest on themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a very, very, very serious danger of burnout here as well, So permission to look after ourselves, but also to give ourselves permission to trust ourselves, to trust our intuition, to be bold, to be brave, to be courageous. This all starts with, first of all, giving permission to ourselves. Yeah, and playing small doesn't serve anyone, does it? At the
No,
end, we're actually in the service of others. So, here in New Zealand, in particular, I'm a stranger in a wonderful land here, and even though I've lived here for 20 odd years, I very much feel at home and deeply appreciate. And you can see also what a wonderful thing has happened here with our leadership during this crisis as well, which is, I have phenomenal appreciation for our Prime Minister, because she embodies some of the qualities that I talk about, and it's so good to have these examples alive in the world right now. But, there is also this tall poppy syndrome here in New Zealand, there's, and I think there's a very big difference between being humble and then actually playing small,
Yep.
and then arrogance at the other end of that spectrum. So it's finding the true north. I think leaders absolutely need to go in a bit, and then how do we give ourselves permission to do that when there's so much that is demanding our attention? And so I often talk about cognitive overload as well, so it's really around healthy boundaries around what we consume, and also internally, so yeah, it's quite a complex piece.
Yeah.
It's one of your themes, this is, and I think people sometimes forget that complicated and complex are actually 2 different things, right?
Very
That
well
actually,
said.
that actually sometimes it's simplicity that best meets complexity,
Very well said.
at least in a state of attitude and a mindset,
Most definitely, and achieving that degree of clarity relative to attitude
Exactly.
and what have you.
Exactly. That's why clarity is so key, because without clarity, we are, well, where are we going?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And are we safe to follow,
Exactly. So especially, Maya, with all the work that you do with all the leaders and people leading from their vantage point in different ways, if you can give sort of 3 elements of advice as to what we should really embrace as we go through this time and really go into what is next for all of us, what comes to mind as sort of 3 guiding thoughts?
Oh, wow, you put me on a spot here.
You're always brilliant, Maya, so by all means.
Well, like I said, to me, like I'll reiterate, because
Yeah.
I really, this is what I try and live by, and this is, and of course, this, I'm not suggesting that I have a piece of the whole puzzle, but this, because my expertise and strength lies in, personal
Yeah.
agency of leaders. So this is where I feel confident to give some advice, and so I think it starts with self-awareness,
Yeah.
um, and that actually is also connected with that is radical self acceptance, but self accountability as well. I think
Hmm.
those are the two components that people sometimes forget. uh, I think, and again, you can see how these things actually stem out of that center. I would say courage.
Hmm.
And, when I talk about courage, I'm very much informed by Brené Brown, because this is the paradox, is that, courage is not some kind of great bravado. It's actually standing in the heart of that vulnerability, at the heart of uncertainty, in the heart of doubt, and then doing that thing that we have to do, that we actually don't have a choice. Otherwise, we would not be no longer in our integrity,
Yeah.
There's a beautiful quote by Václav Havel, who led Czechoslovakia during that incredible turmoil, which I also lived in former Yugoslavia. There was a total state of collapse, which is reminiscent somewhat of what we're going through today.
Yeah.
We're finding ourselves in these watershed times. We will look at what's happening currently with Black Lives Matter. These are big global movements that are
Yeah.
happening. And Václav Havel at that time, he said, hope is not about certainty that something will turn out a certain way. It's not some kind of wishful hope. It's about absolute clarity that I'm committed to what makes sense and what I have no other choice but to do right now. I'm paraphrasing. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
exactly how the quote goes, right? So rather than wishful thinking, it's like, well, no, these are the things that make sense now. And as I take this step in the moment, they will condition the future, right? So being committed to these things in the moment is what gives us hope to
Yeah.
future. So commitment would be my third one, then I'd say.
Very nice. It's very powerful because exactly to your point, it really is radical commitment in the face of doubt that begins to,
Exactly.
yeah, that really begins to allow us to embrace the unknown and navigate it in the way that we
Yeah.
can.
And the only way to do that is to be truly connected with our own values, with our principles, with what we believe in, because otherwise, how can we have confidence? And then we
Exactly.
will be shattered. We will be shattered at a time like this. It will be just too hard. And I honestly believe that every human being can dig deep enough to get in touch with this. And so then, I think one of the big challenges that we face is that we have all become so time poor, and this
Hmm.
is where the gifts of lockdown, I mean, we've just exited, but for the rest of the world who is still in this state, I just want to say that take this opportunity. Don't rush, because the taking this space, the time to reflect, to put things in order, to put things into perspective, to consider things, to slow down a fraction, is so vitally important. And this is where some of the daily practices, like having some time to meditate, to go out for a walk, to journal, these are not just nice to have things. These are foundations of a more conscious way of going forward.
Very well said. Very well said. You're always full of wisdom, my friend. Always, Maya. So all around it. And you know how much I appreciate you. In,
Oh, it's great. I love talking to you.
likewise, likewise. Any other closing thoughts that you'd like to pass on to the world, if you will, Maya? People are listening and very eager to hear your voice all around.
Oh, look, such a really a privilege to share with you. Uh, I think I want to just say one more thing, and that is to really encourage everyone right now to be kind to yourself, be compassionate, because this is a hard time. None of us are perfect. There's no such thing. That does not exist in real world. It's a concept, and at times we will all be challenged. We will make a mistake. Something will lurk out of the shadow to set us back. It's inevitable, and instead of taking it all too much too hard or too personally, is to be open to learn,
Hmm.
to face into it, to lean into that discomfort, but with kindness, with mercy, with generosity, because Otherwise, we won't grow, you know? And so when we extend that attitude of self-compassion and self-kindness to ourselves, it also enables us to hold that space of empathy for others. Yeah. So be kind to yourself and be kind to others. That would be a big parting word from me.
Always appreciated. Always appreciated. Thank you ever so much, Maya, for making the time and the opportunity to have a conversation like this.
Well, I thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope that we will do this again sometime, because it's always such a joy. I really appreciate you inviting me, Sai.
Thank you so much, Maya.